We're going to now go to Dean Zimmerman, and he's going to read the question, and then, or you want to go Anna first?
No,
We're
sharing a question.
we're gonna tag team.
All right.
When I get stuck, I'll tag off, and it's just sort of like a cage match here. And
If you could bring those microphones closer to each of you, that would help.
okay. So the question is, how do you respond to the critique that there can still be free will, even if God knows the future and all the choices you will make? Now, I take it this isn't just how do you respond to the critique that open theism is false. I think I see what's behind the question here, and that it's a very sensible thought that if you're not a Calvinist or someone else who thinks that God sort of divinely determines everything ahead of time, it feels like you could still believe that God knows what the future holds just by seeing it. He just sees it. And seeing that something is the case and knowing that it's the case doesn't necessarily make it so. And if that's all that God does, how could there possibly be any problem about God's foreknowing what I do and that thing that I do also being free? This is a good question. I suspect that different open theists might respond differently to this. I think some open theists are open theists largely for theological reasons, and but many of us, maybe not surprisingly, including myself, are moved by philosophical considerations to think that there's a problem about God's foreknowledge and free will. There's a familiar sort of argument. I guess a version of this can be found in Nelson Pike. It's a kind of an instance of a sort of argument that's often given by Peter Van Inwagen and others for the impossibility of freedom if our actions are determined by something. And the argument basically just goes, in the version of it that we're interested in, goes something like, if God has complete foreknowledge, he believed that I would do this, some ostensibly free action, whatever you like. And someone in the past believing something is a sort of a hard fact about the past. It's settled, it's over, it's done with. It's a sentence written on a piece of paper in the past being true. Well, that feels like it's something that's soft about the past. I can now do something maybe to make it true or false. So if the sentence was written on a piece of paper, Dean will raise a pen. And it turns out that has the property of having been true. Well, that doesn't seem so bad. I did that. I made that change in the past, quote unquote, because it's not really but I can't make the paper not contain those words. Similarly, I can't make God's beliefs to have been different than they were if they've been like that for all eternity. Furthermore, if God's the sort of being that if he believes something, it comes about, and it's sort of a matter of necessity that if God believes it, then it will happen. So I can't change that conditional. If God believes it, then it happens, and I also can't do anything about the fact that he believed this because it's too far in the past. And so the inevitability of his past belief gets sort of transmitted to my action. I can't do anything about the truth of that conditional. If God believes it, then it's true because that's it's essential to God. The critique here, I think, is that while still there's something wrong with the argument somewhere because just knowing it doesn't make it so. I guess I'm willing to say it's true that merely knowing something doesn't make it so, but it can't be that God knows something like my future free action merely by seeing it. So if he were to know it in advance, it would have to be somehow causally determined, either by God or by something else.
Good. Anna Case-Winters.
I don't know that I have a lot to add. I think it's accurate to say that there may be a range of views among open theists on this. For myself, I think such a position would represent a compatibilism that I don't think works. God knows, if God knows the future events as actual, and God knows things infallibly, then they cannot be other than what God foreknows. It seems that that removes freedom for us, but in my thinking, even more importantly, it seems to remove the freedom for God. God can't do something new or different or responsive, so that divine freedom seems to be compromised by such a pattern, just as human freedom is compromised. I think open theists generally want to affirm, as the Christian vision does, that God's knowledge, that every attribute of God is perfect. God's knowledge is perfect. So the question is, what does perfect knowledge entails? We've kind of gone the direction of saying to know things perfectly is to know them as they are. The past is actual, the future is possible, the future is open. And therefore, to know it perfectly, God must know it as it is, as this realm of possibilities. Now, God might have a good sense of what is likely of those things that are occurring. I mean, even I do. I use the illustration with the group this summer. I know that if I make some chocolate chip cookies and I leave them on the counter and Michael comes home from school, that they will not all be there when I return to the kitchen. It's just, I can predict that, though not infallibly. And that's why this, I think, difference must be maintained. So God knows the future as it is, and this open realm of possibilities that maintains our freedom and God's freedom.